Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Mixed Extents. My name's Andrew Prusky and I'm here with my co-hosts Wark Milkerson and Andrew Nocentino. Welcome, guys.
Thanks.
Before we go any further, we want to show the absolutely awesome fashion that Mark has on. If you want to lift your shirt up a little bit there, Mark, we have Mixed Extents t-shirts. So if you want to check those out, you can get them from the, Mark, do you think, link here? And we'll have them in the show notes as well. All the profits that we make from those t-shirts go to funding 8KB and this podcast. We don't have any sponsors whatsoever. We're completely community funded. So anything, every day, basically any extra helps. So onto the show. Today we are talking about Query Store, and I'm joined by our guests, Tracy Boggiano and William Durkin. Welcome to you both. Thank you for joining us. Say something. Can I hear you?
Yep. Hello.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, hi. How you doing? You all right? A bit of intros. We got Tracy Boggiano here, who is a co-organizer of a local user group, Microsoft Data Platform MVP, and has recently published a book on Query Store for SQL Server 2019, identifying and fixing poorly performing queries, which is available at all good booksellers and probably some terrible ones too. Always wanted to say that. Anyway, and then we have William Durkin. We have William, who is a data architect for Data Masterminds, born in the UK, now based in Germany. William is the organizer of the awesome Data Grilling event and creator of Open Query Store. Hey, William, how you doing?
Hey there. Hi. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Great to have you on. So let's dive into the questions. And
Before we dive into questions.
Oh, you want to dive in?
I want to, okay. Anthony brought up the point that I was pointing at my t-shirt. You were talking about my t-shirt. I wasn't talking. Yeah. Nobody saw the t-shirt. So now that I'm talking, everyone can see the shirt.
I forgot the camera switches.
Yeah.
Oh, it just did again. Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, hopefully somebody saw the t-shirt. Regardless, just go to the link that Andrew pointed to.
Yes. So apparently, Mark, do you think this link, you can go to the store. It's on Bonfire. The t-shirts are there. Anyway, enough trying to flog our wares. Onto the show. So I guess we're going to be talking about Query Store today. And I can't think of something that causes more of a stir in SQL Server 2016 when it first got released than Query Store. But would it be fair to say that it's one of the biggest in features and one of the most important features that has been added to SQL Server in, say, the last, 10 years? Tracy, William, what do you think?
I would say so, performance-wise, yes. Because it helps a lot in identifying your poorly performing queries, as my title of the book said, and finding those regress queries, and gets even better as the versions go up to 2017 and 2019.
So you get like the one-stop shop for tracking your queries, basically, instead of having to. I mean, what was the bad old days where we had to dig down into the cache?
Cache, or use good old server-side traces and RML it, which was my old-fashioned way of doing it.
Or profiler.
No, I didn't do that.
That was true.
No, we all did. We just didn't tell anybody.
I swear, profiler. I had someone tell me recently that they didn't learn extended events because it was too new. I'm like, really? Okay.
It might go away, right?
I mean, I can't think of another feature. William, what do you reckon?
Well, I think as a standalone feature, yes, it was revolutionary when it was introduced. It comes in a close second, I think, when was it Service Pack 1 or Service Pack 2 of 2016 came out, and all of those enterprise features fell down into standard edition. That was the showstopper for me. But Query Store, yeah, absolutely fantastic piece of kit to help you, exactly as Tracy said, get insight to what's going on inside your SQL Server, who's stealing your resources over a longer period of time than just looking at the DMVs, which everybody knows gets reset because every client who has problems reboots their SQL Server. Because that is the true performance tuning feature inside SQL Server.
Well, that's turn it off, turn it back on again, and
correct.
Everything is grand.
Yep.
So before we get too far into Query Store, I do want to set the stage on Open Query Store because some listeners might not have heard of that project yet. So William, do you want to give us a quick pitch and description on what Open Query Store is so that folks are kind of familiar with what you got going on there?
Yeah, sure. So Query Store came in 2016, and it works only on 2016 and higher versions of SQL Server. So there's an absolute huge number of SQL servers installed in companies that are on an earlier version. So I, in my infinite stupidity, I would say, and slightly fueled by a nice beer or two with a friend of mine, decided at some conference, wait a minute, why can't we just do the same thing on older versions of SQL Server? It's not magic. I guess as we continue with the discussion today, we'll see a little bit more detail, but Query Store just grabs the stuff in the cache and presents it in a nice way. So that's exactly what we did. We looked at what Query Store has as a feature set. We said, well, we want to grab these queries, we want to find the statistics, the query plans, and blah, 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 store it all together in a database. And then we realized, what other limitations does the real Query Store have? And immediately redesigned Open Query Store to beat those limitations. Yeah, also maybe hubris, and again, fueled by alcohol and stupidity.
We're all about alcohol and stupidity on this show, mate. No worries.
Exactly. That's the story of my life, basically. So yeah, we added features in that just weren't available, like a centralized repository for collecting Query Store style data from multiple databases on one instance, or even on multiple instances into a single central database. Basically just re-engineering it in a way that made sense to us in our youthful, stupid selves.
I remember when it came out. I remember when Query Store first came out, and it was 20. I was working in a shop that we were on 2012, and we weren't upgrading we weren't upgrading. It just wasn't going to happen. So we were, sort of pining looks, looking at Query Store, just And then I remember seeing, I don't know how I saw it on Twitter, or I saw a blog about Open Query Store and went and started playing with it. And I think I wrote a review about it. I did write a review about it as well when it came out, because it's collecting all this data that previously, you go into the DMVs, you're plan cache, you're doing stuff like that, all collected. And that's the one thing as well you mentioned there that has over Query Store, is it centralized for all the databases on the server as well, which is absolutely fantastic. I remember, absolutely love the Open Query Store. But I've since moved to a shop where we're now all on 2017. So
exactly.
halfway tempted to still.
And I have an Azure feedback item in for making it centralized, and I do mention Open Query Store in every Query Store presentation I give, so people can use it if they're not on 2016 yet.
Very cool. Yeah, I do recall I did the presentation about Open Query Store at what was it? It was an event in Germany. I'm trying to think which one.
You did it at my user group as well.
That's quite possible, yeah. But I just recall specifically at this one in Germany, and I forget which one. It doesn't matter. Maybe it was a SQL Saturday. But one of the Microsoft engineers, I think it was, now I forget his name as well, a guy from, I think, Serbia, Jovan Popovic, was sat in the session like taking notes, and I didn't hold back taking digs at Microsoft about the limitations of Query Store and how we were awesome and they suck and so on and so forth. And he came up at the end of the session like, oh yeah, this is really cool. We're gonna, or like, he didn't officially say, but it's like, yep, we're gonna steal some of those features. Like I think we made, it was things around like the limitation of the size of Query Store and how it behaves, and injection of stuff that was old or something. I can't remember exactly, but there were some features that he was like, actually, that's quite a good idea. Not just stupid and alcohol fueled, but actually quite useful. So that was quite cool.
So in that then, what for both of you guys, what are some of those limitations in maybe the first release or subsequent releases of Query Store that you've seen that you found were challenging, and that maybe in the newer releases kind of solved those challenges? So what was missing, and then has it been solved, basically, is the question.
The first releases, like that, capturing ad hoc queries is like a big no-no in 2016 and 2017, because it just bloats up your Query Store as far as size. And you need the size small if you ever use piecemeal restores because it's in your primary file group. So I only keep mine at 2 gigs on anything I run, and it has to be a stored procedure based system if it's 2017 and lower. So they added the custom mode where you could set what it captures based on a time period in 2019. So now you can use ad hoc workloads. So that helps you be able to capture what you need, and it doesn't capture one-off queries that run all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's makes it where everybody can run it now if they're on 2019. And that size limitation, I think is big because like I set it to 10 gigs for a database I had at one place, and I had to because of the troubleshooting I had to do on that system, and it was slow. Querying the DMVs directly is not fast.
When you're saying
or catalog views, as it's technically called.
So getting the data out of Query Store or getting the data out of other areas of SQL Server is slow.
Getting it out of Query Store itself.
Yeah, I've experienced that.
Yeah, it's just not very fast the more data you have. So that's been the main limitations I've ran into. Besides all the bugs it had in 2016.
We find it ironic that a tool for performance tuning has performance problems.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, it is optimized for writes.
It is. It
Pick
is.
one, right?
Yeah.
It's optimized to capture the data, but show it to you, not so much.
So I guess in that sense, then
open up. Oh, you go ahead, Anthony.
No,
Sorry.
please. No, all you.
Oh, me. No.
I insist. Okay.
No, it's always fun. But I was just making an offhand comment about I've seen people try and open up the GUIs, the regress queries and things like this on a server that's like 100% CPU and sitting there going, I wonder what's happening here. And I was like, you might be waiting a while there. Or basically forever, because it's not going to, you're absolutely right that it, as Mark said, optimized for writes, but sometimes pulling that data back out, especially through those GUIs, it isn't particularly great. But I still think those GUIs having a nice graphical representation of, you can see sort of like, great, there's your problem. It is still fantastic.
Yeah. After it's 100%, go in there and worry about the GUI. Otherwise, use the old-fashioned way of troubleshooting stuff.
So in that sense, then, are there any, in my sense, like, are there any workloads that you don't want to use Query Store for? You already described one where you have, you could potentially have very large data sets. What are some troublesome workload patterns that you see in the implementations that you've done and supported where, you kind of maybe back off or don't configure it or have to do something special to make it work correctly?
So far, I haven't, but I haven't implemented it at my current company, which has a very, very, very high workload. So they're not ready to touch that feature yet. It's much higher than any workload that I've worked with before. So
is there that much of an impact of switching it on? Like, will it actually hurt?
From what I've seen at other companies I work with, it doesn't have that much of an impact. I've even created graphs and looked at the performance counters, and it doesn't seem to have too much of an impact, CPU-wise, read or writes wise. But I don't know at this company because they process so much data that it's possible, but we'd have to turn it on somewhere and test it.
Well, the thing you have to consider here, though, is the Query Store is actually only collecting information that's already been gathered and already in memory. It's not generating anything brand new or capturing extra information. So it's effectively taking the information that you'll see in the DMVs and flushing it to disk. So the part that's going to be painful is the flush to disk, the gather and store. And as long as you're not doing that permanently, I think it defaults when you install to every 15 minutes or something. So I'd certainly, on a really busy system, I wouldn't go for let's pull it every minute or whatever. And I would also, like Tracy said, have an upper limit on the size of it to make sure that you're just not going to explode in size. But otherwise, the data is already there. It's, yeah, like I say, it's in the DMBs and you're just writing it to disk. So make sure that you're not disk bound in your entire system. If you are anyway, that's going to be a problem. But otherwise, I would say as well, the overhead should be quite negligible because it's just not, it's not pushing new data or sorting or anything like that. It's just like spew it onto disk, look at it later and analyze it later. And like you say, it's heavily optimized for writing so that you can then do later analysis. I myself wouldn't be, if a client calls me and says, I've got performance problems, we've got Query Store running already. My first port of call for a performance analysis would not necessarily be Query Store. It feels, or I use it as a tool on a much more longer term basis where we're not fighting fires. It's more, okay, we want to do a long-term analysis of which queries we have, how is regression going, how is overall query performance doing, rather than, oh no, my query is really bad, please use Query Store to fix it. It's the wrong tool in my opinion.
And I do know in CU8 of 2019, and I didn't read too much details on it, they did put something in there about capping the memory for Query Store, but I didn't read the details on it. So memory might be the other metric you might want to look at for Query Store if it proves to be a problem. But I really haven't seen a problem with it performance-wise. So.
Yeah, but I would agree as well, though. I've not had it implemented on a system with clients where there's this heavy load. So I couldn't say that it's got a X% performance impact or anything like that. Microsoft seems to be rather happy to turn it on for all Azure SQL DBs, regardless of what's going on. So if they're happy with it, I'm going to be quite happy with it, to be honest.
Yeah,
well, the cynic in me says I wouldn't take that as a metric, but all right.
Right, but the easy sell is, let's say it has some quantifiable percentage of, like, let's say it costs 3%. It may or may not, I have no idea. But if you can solve some query performance problems and gain that back, right?
Oh, yeah.
There's your gains. So
For sure.
Yeah, when we turned it on at one of the places I was at, we literally got 20% CPU back with the autocorrection feature in 2017.
One of the places, Tracy? One of the places.
Well, I've worked at like 4 places in the last couple of years. So.
That was when we worked together, wasn't it?
Maybe. Bob
no,
might have wrote about it as well. So
yeah,
that was, I remember switching that on, and all our CPU graphs went dunk. I was like,
yep.
Oh, I think we might have some parameter sniffing going on there.
So both of you, I would categorize as pretty prolific performance tuners. You know, you both are experts in Query Store and Open Query Store. And you kind of touched on tooling a little bit, saying you're using these tools as the big picture, right? To learn where the workload patterns are and things like that. But what are the other tools that you're using to do these kind of things, to help solve performance problems, to really understand, like, what's the thing that you have to approach and attack when you're looking at a server that either is on fire or long-term, so we can look at it from both angles?
Who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Tracy.
Everyone's so polite. Oh no, after you.
Tracy, go.
Well, I'm lucky enough now to just be able to use SentryOne, but we won't talk about that. But I like to look at execution plans a lot and see what can be tuned there. And of course, looking at the cache still is useful, even though it's being put in Query Store. Seeing what's being run with SP who is active and things like that. You know, just the typical things you look at, I believe, you know. My first chapter in my book technically goes through all the troubleshooting you use in the old-fashioned way. So
that is the Open Query Store book that you can buy. Mark, do you think?
Yeah, we can put a link there.
Yeah, I agree with Tracy. It's the old-fashioned, but the easiest way is you use the typical scripts that either you've built yourself or you've stolen from the internet. So SP Who Is Active, as already mentioned, really fantastic tool. And also definitely, whether it's SentryOne or one of the many other offerings in the market, have monitoring. It's something that I hammer home to all of our clients. If you don't have monitoring, get monitoring. I don't care if you've got SentryOne, Redgate, whoever, it doesn't matter, just as long as you've got long-term performance metric collection and query execution as well. Query Store's nice, but it's not a monitoring tool. It's collecting statistics, but it's not going to alert you. It's not going to provide you with an easy to see performance metric of these are your 10 worst queries over the last year. I mean, you can get that stuff from Query Store, but an actual tool with a front end is the way to go. And don't build query monitoring yourself. Just don't. The tools all cost somewhere around about $1,000 a server. It's $1,000 well spent. End of story. You cannot build these things yourself. Doing Open Query Store, I've realized also you can't build Query Store yourself. We've got a lot of limitations in that project that we'll never be able to beat. So just use what the professionals have built, right? I'm certainly not a professional in building these things.
I can see Mark's eye twitching. I can see
Right.
it.
Well, you can build
We're
them.
in a special environment.
Yeah, right. You can build them, but then can you maintain them? That's where it falls down, right?
Exactly.
When new versions come out, that's when it gets to be painful. And
Yeah.
so having to make sure that you're dealing with new features, all those different things in the life cycle of a project can be super duper challenging.
Exactly. Being able to support multiple versions of SQL Server and blah, blah, blah. Just buy a tool. It's so much simpler.
So we're definitely a tool building shop, I'll say. But like, for example, we use Telegraph to gather metrics, but I pretty much rewrote the SQL Server plugin for that, and now other people maintain it. So I don't have to maintain anything, but we still get to use it and get all the benefit, which is fantastic. And that's one good reason to use open source. And then also, as far as Query Store goes, it's not available yet, but Pablo on my team is creating he's created, and we use daily, a system that aggregates all of our Query Store data onto a single server. And he's working on getting that released open source as well.
The cool thing about that is, and not to big him up, because I know you watch this, Pablo. It's not just per server; it's per environment. So he goes like, however many servers we have, is collecting all this data from everywhere, and he's put Power BI reports over it, which is kind of cool. I think he's been, but as you were saying, like he's been learning the pain points of building your own tool by going through the documentation in the last week or so. Building all that out.
Isn't he presenting that at Group by like next week?
He is. And Mark, do your thing. A link to his session. I'm liking this feature that, when we say feature, it's Mark doing editing.
Oh man, yeah, I'm gonna have a lot of editing to do. All right, that's enough links for today, Andrew.
So once again, that link is.
Oh man.
Trying to help Pablo out. I noticed he was on the schedule because the person I mentored for Group by had to step out, and Pablo got to take his place. So
cool.
And it was Query Store, so I had to notice. So now I have to watch it.
It'll definitely be a good one. So yeah, definitely watch it.
I was looking forward to him doing it for SQL Saturday Raleigh, but then COVID, blah blah blah. That's the last mention of that I want to hear.
Yes, we are a COVID-free zone.
All in our houses. So we talked a little bit about maintaining a project, which can be challenging, right? And this will be one quick question for you, William. Open Query Store, is there a use case for it for versions that have Query Store, so 2016 and up? So if people are listening, they think, well, is it really just for the older versions, or can I use it for the newer versions too?
So the limitations of the real Query Store, if you're hitting those, then that's where the Open Query Store could come in, right? If you want to aggregate everything into a central database, Query Store still can't do that. Whether that's going to come at some point, no idea. It would make sense for them to be able to do that, or to offer up some way of like a log shipping, but for Query Store. Something like that would be really cool. And also, I remember now what it was, because Tracy mentioned it. It was this making sure Query Store collects maybe even single execution ad hoc queries. So that was the thing we put into Open Query Store, was you can decide how many times a query must be executed before it's actually recognized for Open Query Store. And equally, you can filter in and out certain databases or certain objects. Like if you know there is an entire schema in a database that you don't care about, you can say, ignore this entire schema. So it's little bits and pieces like that that you can run. Technically, you can run Open Query Store on any version of SQL from 2008 upwards, I think. There was a limitation on 2005, so we couldn't go that far back. But 2008 onwards, even up to 2019, you can install it if you want to. And it would be the slight limitations that, or extra features that we offer that would be interesting. Yeah.
Do you still have the option of choosing how the data is collected? I remember it was, you could either set up Service Broker or collect via a job via a SQL Server.
Yeah, that's right. So the whole idea was we wanted to be, or try to be, feature parity compatible with Real Query Store, which included being able to collect on a schedule on any edition of SQL Server, which meant if we want it on Express Edition, then we had to go away from SQL Agent. And the only way to do a scheduled collection there was, well, a window scheduled task, but that's sucky because it's not inside SQL. So we went with Service Broker. And I was the stupid one who forced that feature to happen. So I had to learn a little bit about Service Broker and how to make that work. And I have to admit, it was a Friday to Sunday sort of a project step. And it was very much sit down and try and figure out how Service Broker works, fail, drink beer in frustration, try again, make it work, and then forget how you made it work while you were drunk.
I was going to ask you how many beers that took.
It was a lot. Yeah, it was painful the next day.
Is there a name for this type of development process?
Oh, there is. Yeah, because
Germans have a word for everything, actually. So
well, no, it's not even a German word. You see it. I've read it quite often that there's developers will get stuck at something, and it will be either they'll smoke weed or they'll have beers or absinthe or some really hard liquor, and then fix the problem, and then not be able to remember how they fixed it. But it doesn't matter because it got fixed.
It's true. I used to be a developer and do that.
There's got to be a term for it. It's something like beer fueled development or something. I'm sure
BFD. There you go. Yeah, you can coin
BFD.
That.
Very good. Like it.
So let's pivot a little bit, and you touched on this a second ago.
Pivot organically.
Sorry. Right.
And by the way, it is called alcohol fueled development. If you want to look online, there's a wiki AFD. About it and everything. So there you go.
Cool. So you touched on this a second ago, and the question's open to both of you guys. But the intelligent query processor, right? So it's Query Store is not just monitoring and us reactively looking at things. So some proactive stuff can happen. So you can't talk about the features that you've seen in intelligent query processing with Query Store and the wins that you've had in certain types of workloads. So you talked about one a few minutes ago, Tracy. You want to kind of dive into that a little bit more detail?
Yeah, we first upgraded to 2017 and we turned on the auto plan correction. And our CPU, like on one server, was like 60%, and it dived to 40 instantly because it just automatically started finding the plans that regressed in performance and finding the good plans. And we originally wrote a proc that like tried to throw that stuff out of the procedure cache automatically, but guessing at which ones were the best ones to throw out of the cache isn't necessarily the best way to do it. So having that on there was real nice. I've actually got a blog post on it showing the graph going down and stuff. It was pretty neat.
If you, Tracy, do the fingers thing. I have a blog post.
I got a blog post.
More editing for Mark.
Look in the show notes.
No, that's awesome because those kind of CPU gains, you can go back to the business, and that's real money. Because if you're running enterprise and you have lots of cores, and you pretty much literally reduce the CPU load in half, you might not have to buy another server that year or something like that. So that becomes a real tangible benefit, not just the geek value of, hey, I beat that query, right?
Yeah. Well, that was a gain across 40 or 50 servers I think was what we had in production. So that wasn't just one.
Yeah.
So that was a nice win for us. So.
Yeah, and I think the emergence of Query Store was exactly that, the first step to be able to enable these sorts of magical automatic corrections inside of a system. This whole idea of a robo DBA is just going to continue, which is exactly what I want. I mean, I'm sure pretty much all of us on this call, I would say we could sit down and query tune and reduce CPU load. I bet we can't do it within 2 minutes. Like Tracy said, turn the feature on and boom, our CPU dropped. I don't want to spend a day doing query tuning to try and get those sorts of improvements. If I can just click a button, turn on a feature, and it just works, yeah, hells yeah, I want to do that. Then I can spend my time doing something useful.
Or worse yet, have multiple versions of the same store procedures for different customers because they're in the same database.
Yep.
Well, this is the age-old, the DBA job is dead. Long live the DBA.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, I bang on the drum of I am intrinsically a lazy person and don't want to do the work. So if I have a button I can click and it will do that work for me, fantastic. And it's not just the case that I want to be lazy. It's just I don't want to spend my time on something that can be done by a computer. That's why we have computers. They should do that work. It's grunt work, and it's useless in sitting a human there doing that. Then I can sit there and rather redesign the entire database to be better. That's something that is not yet possible using Query Store or some intelligence or whatever. Yeah. That's still a human endeavor, unfortunately.
Yeah, I tell people I'm lazy all the time. We're supposed to say we're efficient, is what people tell me.
Yeah, well, when I say it in German, it's always going to be I'm really efficient, right? But yeah, between us, I'm just being lazy.
Yeah, that's what I always say too.
Someone please correct me, but wasn't it Bill Gates who said they'll always hire a smart lazy person because the smart lazy person will figure out the easiest way to do something?
That's what it's attributed to him for sure. Yeah. I've used that in my sessions before to say, automate everything, be the lazy person.
So speaking of the kind of in the same vein with the DBA having to do less work, what are the most common mistakes you see people making when they're setting up Query Store, if you have any stories about that? Like things that people are doing that are actually generating more work for themselves.
To be honest, from my side, I've never seen it actually done, that sort of thing happen. It's more like, hey guys, this Query Store thing's really cool and can help you. And they're like, what? This what thing can do what? So it was more a success story for me so far. A client where a query's regressed because they went from an old version of SQL Server to a new version, and the query optimizer just went, bleh. So use the Query Store, prove that that's happened, and get a fix built in. That it's more a success thing than a failure so far for me.
Yeah, I've seen all successes. The only thing I would say is just make sure you have the default size is pretty small depending on what version of SQL you're on. So I think it's 100 megabytes in 2016, unless they've changed it with the CU. And then it's like 1,000 megabytes in 2019. I don't remember what it was in 2017 because memory's not that great. But I at least set it up to 2 gigs. That usually keeps about 30 days or more for your report, because your report goes 30 days out. That's in your GUI. So other than that, the default settings are usually pretty good, and you get the wins.
Yep.
So in that context, though, for the viewers that might not and listeners that might not have the experience with Query Store yet, like if I hit one of these limits of like this data size, or like what's going to happen? Like what is there like an adverse effect that can occur when we don't size this thing correctly?
Well, the data size has an automatic cleanup that's set on by default, so you don't have to worry about that. It'll automatically, I think it tries to keep 20% free space or something like that. It doesn't always work, but it pretty much tries to keep 20% free space. And so it just automatically cleans it up when it comes to the space. So
it's a switch on and let it sort itself out type deal.
Yeah. So, but like I said, the smaller it is, unless you're keeping. So if it's 100 megs and 20%.
Okay, so that's
you might not get that much data because it's keeping execution plans.
I have 10 minutes of performance data to troubleshoot. Have you seen some of the databases I've had to work on? Yes.
One other thing I've thought of is sometimes it can go into an error state.
Mhm.
And you not know about this. We had this happen one time. Andrew and Mark, they remember this.
Yep.
And it was across a lot of databases. And I remember asking Bob Word about why it does this in Dallas, and he had no clue it could do it. And so he went and researched it, but then the ticket came back on how to fix it. I don't know if it's actually documented on their website very well, but I have another blog post that you can set up a SQL agent job and it'll check all the, I wasn't good blog post. And you can set up a SQL agent job that'll go through and check all the databases automatically and reset it so that it's not in an error state and you don't have to constantly check it. So it's in the book too, but blog post is easier to copy and paste.
Speaking of the book.
Yeah, but, I mean, you wrote a whole book on the subject. Link to the book. Thanks, Mark.
Well, at least you'll have this nice visual cue, right?
Yeah, you just got to roll through the video and do that horrible thing where you got to sit there and watch yourself speak and talk. Nobody likes doing that. I'm pretty sure every speaker who's ever complained about having to pre-record a session, 90% of the complaint is that they have to sit there and watch themselves and listen to themselves talking back. And I can see people nodding as I'm talking. Like,
yeah.
Don't tell me about that because I have to do that on the 12th. I don't want to.
Where are you speaking?
Summit.
Oh, we're not doing a link to
that. That was mean.
We'll put a link in.
I'm speaking on an important topic. So
what's your session on Summit, Tracy?
It's on mental health. See, it's important.
Okay, no, absolutely. Do the fingers.
Do the fingers. There you go.
We would just want to say thank you to our editor, Mark, for all the extra work he's putting in for these episodes.
Right. Now, how are we going to surface that to the podcast listeners?
It's in the show notes.
Okay.
It's in the show notes too. Links.
All right. So do we want to continue on that line of questioning about the books or want to shift gears, guys? What are we thinking?
We'll talk about the book. Absolutely
Okay.
Talk about Tracy's book. Tracy wrote a whole book on Query Store. I was like, how did you get into writing the book? What was the driving factor of writing the book on Query Store? Like of all the features, why didn't you write a book and say in-memory OLTP?
Because someone asked me to.
Oh, fair enough.
Well, technically, somebody recommended me to A-Press to write the book on Query Store, which I didn't know at the time until like 3 months later. But then A-Press had contacted me, and I was like, okay. And I'd been presenting on it since like it was in CTP 2 on 2016. Is
that how you got known about it? Because you were presenting on it and blogging about it, and they saw this person is doing all this good stuff about it. We've got an expert here. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and then I managed to rope Grant into helping me. So,
some guy called Grant Pritchard who nobody's ever heard of.
Yeah. Well, he says it's my book, so we don't. That's what he always says is he didn't do very much. So he's lying, but.
How was the book writing process in general? I don't think anyone else here written a book.
Yep.
Writing.
Okay. Yeah. I wrote an online book, if that counts. But how did you find the whole process?
If you make an outline, it's not too bad, but it still takes a long time. But if you stay up all night and do the what was that method, that the beer drinking method? It goes much smoother.
Yeah.
You just may have to go back and make corrections or reread it before you submit it.
I'm gonna have to try that tonight.
Highly recommend it.
Do your Pluralsight courses that way, Anthony.
Alcohol-filled Pluralsight courses.
No,
fantastic.
Those don't combine. No.
I don't think so.
My name's
Anthony Prusky. So, all right, let's bring it back. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So in that though, so this is a question that we ask pretty much during every show, or at least I've asked during every show, what's the one feature in Query Store or Open Query Store, William, that if you could have it tomorrow, what would that be? Like, what do you want the most out? That might be, it's a missing feature in Query Store or Open Query Store.
Other than the obvious aggregation feature.
If that's the
You
one.
can't take
that's
answers
the one.
away from it. You can't say,
Yeah,
we're going to ask you a
just
question, but you
did.
can't answer this.
I have an Azure feedback item on that one from like 2016.
Mark, will you add a link to that so that people can upvote it?
Oh man.
You're
Oh,
such
boy.
a great editor, Mark.
Yeah, I guess I am.
All right. So what do you think, guys? Is that the consensus from both of you, the aggregation functionalities? Or do you guys
Yes,
have other
across
stuff?
databases, across servers. They can do it because what was that feature they had in DW that they had back in 2008 days? What was that?
Management data warehouse. Yeah.
Yeah, that. I know it disappeared, but they can do it.
I mean, do you think it's a gap that monitoring vendors could fill?
They can. I do know of one vendor that is using query store data in their app.
Mm-hmm.
So Deere is already using query store data in their tooling. So, but I don't know of any others that are. But I don't know if it's aggregating it or not. I'd only seen like 5 minutes of it.
Right.
But it seems like Microsoft should do it. They know it the best, and they can, make sure it's working the best.
Awesome. Okay.
And they did MDW, so they can do it.
All right. I think we're going to wrap to go. I just want to actually ask, William, you mentioned that you've written a book. Could we have some details on your book?
I co-wrote 2 books on SQL 2017 and SQL 2016. Yeah, it was not a very enjoyable experience. Let's put it that way.
No, and is that like no more than never say never, I guess.
Was it like on the whole product or just
Oh,
one
sorry.
feature?
So my internet just like died a second.
There's some more editing for you, Mark.
Okay.
Exactly.
We were wondering there. It's like, is he okay? He's all right.
Yeah.
He like died after he
much
wrote
beer.
the books.
No, just reliving the terrors of writing a book. So it was co-wrote with 2 other people, and it was over everything to do with developing stuff on SQL 2017, on SQL 2016. So I wrote the chapters on in-memory OLTP and some other things I can't remember. And it was very much a long, late nights of writing and hating myself. And I said after the first book, I'll never write another one. And then we did the refresh. And since then, I've actually said I'm not going to write another book because it was seriously unenjoyable. Just the process of writing, like I'm quite happy with the product that we created, but yeah, I hated school and hated doing homework. So now just start writing a book, which is just homework. It was terrible. So yeah, mistakes were made twice.
I always remember seeing a cartoon, and it's just a little picture of a guy sitting at a piano and thinking to himself, I don't enjoy this at all anymore. And the caption over it says, how to know you're a professional.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to have
It's very
tons and
depressing
tons
if you
of
think about it,
time.
but I've always remember that.
Yeah.
Tons and tons of time.
Yeah, it was absolutely insane.
So you have to make sure you have that time.
That's kind of the
Well,
thing.
yeah.
So that's the kind of thing that's going on. Sorry, I'm really going to plug myself here. I wrote an ebook about running SQL Server in Docker, but because the technology changes so quickly, the good thing about being online is I can just go back and go, oh, that bit doesn't work anymore and edit it. Once you publish that book, that's kind of it. I mean, there's second editions and revisions and things like that, or you can publish online where you say, oh, this is incorrect, and you can go here, but it's really not the same. So yeah, I can see what you're saying when you come, like, it has to be right.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a thing, like they always say, don't read the comments. And I did. I read a couple of people's opinions of the book and stuff, and they were like, it was a sequel 2016 book, so it was focused on that version. And then you get dinged for, well, in sequel 2017, it's not like that. It's like, well, of course not. It's a 2016 book. So yeah, that sort of also was fueled for me saying, don't do it anymore. Especially versioned books. I'm sure there's evergreen content out there, but yeah, I'm not going to write another book anytime soon.
I got a complaint on Amazon that they couldn't return the PDF or the physical book to get the other way around, and gave me a 1 star, and I'm like, that's not our fault.
Yeah, it's you suck completely for the way that Amazon deals with your order. Yeah.
That bit of advice was given to me when you start blogging or when you start speaking. It's the feedback. It's like, don't take the comments to heart, or don't even read the comments. And I think it's one of the most universally ignored pieces of advice that everyone reads the comments.
The ability to comment on my blog. No comments.
Okay, so I think that's us done for talking about Query Store. Tracy, William, thank you very much for joining us. Hope you've all enjoyed. Everyone say bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
And we're out.
All right.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Hope you two had
Link
fun.
to my blog post.
We will
Our
definitely
websites.
There's a lot of editing on there, bro.
Oh my gosh. And I didn't.
You do realize that Mark's editing this, so he can put whatever he wants in there.
Mm.
It doesn't have-